For those who don't know, Blue Meridian invests in scaling solutions that improve economic and social mobility and help people move out of poverty. I spend most of my time trying to find people who are doing incredible things and invest in them to take those to as many people as possible. That is, as many people here know, that, the old adage, it is best to fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. So that's why today, the perception I want to talk to you about is to get you to fall in love with the problem that I have been pursuing for most of my career. So let me start with how I got here. I didn't think I did that, but okay. So I grew up in Southeast DC, for people who know DC, and I was, thank you. I met a lady in a grocery store when I was 3 years old, and she walked me back down to my mom and said that she wanted me to come to her school. And because of her generosity and my parents' hard work, I was able to go to a private school very different than most of the schools that my friends went to. And I was at my best friend's house when I was in 3rd grade. His older brother was in 6th grade. He was one of the smartest, coolest, best at everything people I knew. And that day I wound up helping him with his homework. And because of who he was, I knew it was not about him. And I remember asking my mother, why can't everybody have good schools? And I want to challenge you today to ask the question, is the fundamental driver of most inequity in our world our inability to provide affordably and at scale what people need to thrive? And if it is, then the question, since I had to put AI in this presentation, is how does AI help us actually deliver that, again, affordably at scale? Now, many of you know I started my work in education, and the reality is that the reason I went to education is everybody talks about that being the fundamental driver of economic mobility. But it helped me also to understand something that I didn't. I heard about this guy named Benjamin Bloom, who at the time did some work, an early experiment, where he explained that he thought that the bell curve as applied to human potential and achievement was a flawed framework. And in fact, it was mostly used to sort as opposed to really understand where people were. And in fact, we were using it in our school systems, but what he did was he ran an experiment. And what he asked was, what if you gave every child ideal conditions? What could they do? In his definition, his proxy for ideal conditions at that time was an expert tutor, one-on-one. So it's interesting because what this depicts is that what he figured out is, compared to a regular classroom, he could, with a one-to-one tutor, get C students to be A+ students and D and F students to be B+ and A- students. With the right conditions, all the students could perform at what were considered the highest levels. Now think about that for a second. What that means is people really focused on on intensive tutoring. But what it means is we're making choices every day about who gets access to those things. So there's a woman, a doctor, named Dr. Pamela Cantor, who has distilled all this down. Context drives opportunity. Opportunity drives thriving and whether or not you realize your human potential. Your environment, your experiences, your relationships, if you think about it, like these are the same things your grandmother told you. Those are the things that are determinative. And yet, we know the inequality of the way these things are delivered. So the question becomes, for all of us, how do we deliver these things affordably and at scale to everyone? Let's start with the experiences. People's lives are made and broken across their lives from the time that they're born through to becoming thriving adults. Showing up supported and cared for, being ready for school, being able to read and do math. You can go all the way across. None of these are surprising. Everyone here knows this. We also know that there are isolated examples of things that work in every one of these areas, even for the lowest income kids. Once again, what we have failed to do is figure out how to do it affordably at scale. What we now know is that we can get people benefits, which used to take them 8 to 9 hours of paperwork to figure out how to fill out, and get it done with them in 15 minutes, completely changing the amount of resources they have available to them. That's just one way that we can actually do this work. Experiences are but one part of it, though. We invest in places because experiences in isolation don't matter. If you don't get them to show up where people live and work in ways that they can compound upon each other, then it's really difficult to change the trajectory of someone's life, especially someone who's starting in poverty. So the question becomes, like, all these things we know about, it's about your social environment, your built environment, are there housing, amenities? It is about your employment environment and whether or not there are jobs, good jobs, and pathways to those jobs. And I already mentioned access to the public systems to fill the gaps where the markets don't actually work with you because you can't afford to pay. We talked about affordability. A lot of times in our sector, we aren't talking about the cost side of the equation. Everyone knows that the costs are going up, but I just want you to understand exactly how fast. Easy to see that in this chart, that this basic bundle of the things that people need to thrive is going up. Here's what I want to add. There's a reason to use the median male, but here's what to remember. In 1980, it took the median male 40 weeks to earn enough to cover the basic bundle, and they still had enough for savings, vacations, dinners out, et cetera, et cetera. They did it again in 2022, 62 weeks. 62 weeks. We're missing some weeks here. In 1980, the median male in the second quintile, barely, but still had enough to cover the basic bundle. In 2022, they're 2.5 times below water. So yes, we need to figure out how to increase people's income, but look at those cost curves. They are moving at twice the rate of income. Can we apply AI in ways that actually help us reduce the cost of providing in high quality ways, the things that people need to thrive? This map shows the US and where the jobs went right after the last recession in 2010. I guess that's not the last recession anymore. And what this basically shows, I won't take you into the details, is that what it says, 50% of the jobs went to 2% of the counties. What it doesn't show you is that deaths of despair in the places where the jobs faded away and where the jobs didn't come increased dramatically. And so what you're seeing and hearing from people all around the country is opportunity is happening for some people, not for us, and they're seeing dysfunction then show up in their communities in ways that they are unused to seeing. And the thing about the Raj Chetty data, many of you have heard of Raj Chetty, I'll talk more about him in a second, who dug into economic mobility, is he's very clear that it is not just how your parents are doing, but in fact it is most important how the parents in your community are doing and of your friends. That's what determines your potential for economic mobility. So when you see all of these places that are not getting access to opportunity, just think that that is actually every time diminishing the likelihood that they'll be able to that kids that aren't even in good homes won't be able to see the opportunity in front of them. Every time I point out a problem, I want you to remember that the key question here is, how can we actually affordably at scale solve this problem? And can these new tools and technologies help us? Last thing. This is a problem I don't know if I can help us with. Raj Chetty became famous for this chart. It basically says if you were born in 1940, you had a better than 90% chance of doing better than your parents. If you were born in 1985, you had only a 50% chance to do better than your parents. And the thing that came up in that context was, he said, well, what could you do that would have made a difference? We keep hearing about growth. He said 1940s was one of the fastest times of growth in the country. What would happen? We moved from 50 to 60% of people doing better than their parents. But if you shared the growth the way we did in the 1940s, fully 80% of people would still be doing better than their parents. The point here is that we made choices in the public and private sector that have determined 2/3 of the decline in economic mobility in this country. The good news is that we can make new decisions. The bad news is nobody likes those decisions. So I'll end here. I said that context drives opportunity. Well, choices drive context. And the question for us is, when we look at this screen, which of these children are we choosing not to have access to what they need to thrive in ways they can afford? They all have visions. They all have potential. Will we give it to them? Thank you.